module. Today we're going to be covering pivot points. Please pause this video and take a moment to read this trade disclaimer, as the information contained in this video is not financial advice and is only for educational purposes. In this module, we will cover the utility of pivot points, how to correctly implement them, and then go over some examples and tips and tricks on how to best use them. Pivot points can provide targets for a move and even entries. They can also provide the invalidation level for a trade setup. It is possible to design a trading strategy around pivot points. In order to implement pivot points, you will need to activate the Pivot Points Standard Indicator in TradingView. Then you can select the pivot's time frame. We recommend that you use daily for intraday trade setups and weekly for swing trade setups. You can also select the pivot type, and we recommend that you select Fibonacci. Now you can use the S and R pivots as support and resistance levels. R1 and R2 are above P, and they can be used as price targets for longs or even as short entry levels. S1 and S2 are below P, and they can be used as price targets for shorts or even as long entry levels. Now let's have a look at a practical example. To activate the Pivot Points Standard Indicator, simply click on Indicators in TradingView and then type Pivot Points Standard in the search box, selecting the top result. Next, you can modify the settings in the indicator to fit the trade setup that you're trying to find. For this example, we are looking for a possible intraday trade setup, and we have selected the daily pivots time frame. We have also selected the Fibonacci pivot type. Here, you can enter the number of pivots back that you would like to see. We recommend that unless you're doing backtesting, that you leave this setting at 1. Here, you can activate up to 5 S pivots and 5 R pivots. Now, let's see if we can find a possible intraday trade setup using the pivot system. Here, I have marked the daily open, and we can observe that price is ranging around this level. A possible trade setup would be either a long from the P center pivot or a possible short from the first resistance pivot or even the second one. If we do find a possible long entry at the center pivot and get the appropriate reaction, we could target R1 and R2 as possible take profit levels. Let's see what actually happened next. As we can observe, price initially went up towards the first resistance pivot, and after a short deviation, ended up rejecting from this level and traveling all the way down to our P center pivot. In this case, we could have possibly taken a short scalp trade from the resistance pivot and subsequently a long trade from our P center pivot. Once we enter a possible long trade here, we can target once again the first resistance and the second resistance pivots, which in this case gave us a very nice successful trade setup. We recommend that you always use confluence when attempting to find a trade entry using the pivot points system. Here, for example, we could have used a Fibonacci retracement from low to high to find a very nice confluence of our center pivot with the CC. Now, let's go over some tips and tricks. It is very important that you use confluence with the pivots. For example, Fibonacci tools. It is also possible to use a combination of pivots from Asian and American or European exchanges. Here is the take-home message for this module. Pivot points provide support and resistance levels that can be used as price targets or even possible entries. We recommend that you use the daily pivot time frame for intraday trade setups and the weekly pivot time frame for swing trade setups. Price is drawn to the Chinese pivots. This concludes today's module. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Happy learning and happy trading.